copy of the catalogue? I don't see you with one. Yeah, so one of the benefits of coming to this talk is you get a rare limited edition catalogue. It's not available anywhere else. Anybody else hasn't got one? Okay, good. So I'm going to do a short introduction, and our main speaker is Sean Carroll. I'll introduce you to him shortly. This is actually, I'll wait a little bit more for people. So I won't do the proper introduction yet. For those people online, if you go to the Computer Arts Society website and click on the Little Scoundrels banner, you will be able to see a PDF copy of the catalogue that we're distributing here. You may make some available online for ordering. We have some left over from tonight, which I think we will. And there'll be an opportunity at another event actually related to this during the EVA conference. And if you are coming in person, there might be a few left over for that as well. The reason I want everyone to have one of these, access to it, certainly online, is because we're going to have a bit of a discussion. And you may want to flick through this during the evening and help you contribute to the discussion. Have you? Okay, you got one there. So I think what we have tonight is actually, and I'm going to use this word with little air marks, quite radical. Because what we're looking at is this radical history of computer art society. And the way in which some of these early stories have been revisited and uncovered is a fascinating story in its own right. And that's what one of the things that Sean Carroll's going to talk about. What I'm going to say as part of my introduction is that what this exhibition reveals to me is this radical nature of the early computer art society. And to an extent, it was driven by a few individuals, but also I think it was actually the culture and the collection of people involved in the early computer art society that made it radical. So we had Gustav Metzger editing the first issue, or the first editor of Page magazine. We had Frida Narker. We had plenty of other contributors to a really, I think, important narrative about what it means to integrate computer technology, digital technology, into art practice. And like I said, my personal view is to say that I think in some respects we've lost sight of this a little bit. I'm not saying every artist, there are plenty of, again, I'm putting quotes around, invisible quotes around this term, there are plenty of radical artists around, and we all know radical artists, you may be radical artists yourself, but I think certain uses of technology have almost entered into sort of the parlance and use of digital artists without proper criticism. The criticism, of course, can be good, can be bad. It means just thinking about something critically. Something is necessarily bad. So the exhibition here, Listen Scoundrels, has been put together by Sean Carroll, and it's been put together by doing an analysis of Page magazine, where it captured those early discussions. And of course, the great thing about not having the internet around is that everything on the whole is written down. So they could have a discussion through the Page magazine, whereas now it's emails and Twitter groups, and it's maybe a little less considerate involvement, but it's not recorded in the same way. So the exhibition Listen Scoundrels, I think, subtitled Call to Action from Early CAS, really brings to light this radical early computer art society and asks lots of questions which are incredibly relevant to now. And hopefully you've been looking through the catalogue and you'll see that some of these quotes that Sean has highlighted pop up. And apart from the fact we know they've been written in the late 60s, early 70s, are as relevant to now as at any point in time. So I'm just sort of picking up on here about the art market. Page 30. So page 30, when was that roughly? That's going to be in the early 70s, 72? 72, 73, right. So the art has reduced art to a series of fleeting fashions driven by profit rather than genuine artist merit. Art dealers determine what's valuable and artists conform to their demands. Okay, a lot of artists complain about the art market, but that could be written by somebody now about NFTs. As an example. And let's have a look. Okay, so great quote here. This is from Catherine Nash, issue 7. So probably 1970, I think that was. 20 years of computerized society, transparent, so 20 years. 20 years Hence, no artist can ignore the computer. That's one thing. He will have to adjust to it, cope with it, or use it. You cannot reject it. Now, that was written in 1970 by Catherine Nash. That could be written now about AI. Artists talking about AI and saying, you know, I certainly was a bit, well, I'm critical of AI. I was actually almost, not, I wouldn't say I was never being dismissive, but I wanted to understand it before I had a strong opinion on it about AI. And one thing I realised, you can't ignore it. Well, that person there is saying, Catherine Nash is saying exactly the same thing about technology as it was back then. And of course, they were right. Technology can't be ignored. Every artist uses probably technologies, probably a digital technology, if it's just to communicate with other people about their work. And so on. You'll find these fascinating quotes, opinions. Paul Brown, for example, has an interesting thing to say on page 40. The online version of the catalogue does have page numbers, because I realised after I'd sent it to print, the quoting stuff, I need to tell people which page number it is. You have a special edition without page numbers. And so on. So you've got really interesting calls to action, as Sean describes them, coming from the early Computer Art Society, that appear to me to be incredibly relevant to now. And you may agree with some of them, you may disagree with them. I hope you disagree with some of the things we're going to say tonight, I might say, and I hope you agree with some. I hope you have opinion. And maybe we could actually introduce a dialogue around these topics into the Contemporary Computer Art Society. So my hope really for this event is going to kick off a bit of a process where we consider a couple of questions, make a note of the questions, a few questions. And we'll have opportunities to talk about this towards the end. So what does it mean to be radical? I put these invisible air quotes around the term radical. Perhaps it's an overused term. What does it mean? Have a ponder about this maybe during what should CAS do to engage with a dialogue and present a contemporary art dialogue which is critical and radical? But I don't mean it's dismissive of some of these latest technologies, of course not, but it should be offer a critical insight into them. And then something I would like to ask is what might you be able to contribute to maybe a revitalised computer art society that is engaging with radical dialogues? So the reason you've got catalogues is so you can think about things, don't be too distracted from the talks, but on the other hand, you can be looking at stuff that Sean's talking about. The plan for this evening then is my rambling introduction, last 10 minutes, roughly right. I'm going to hand over to Sean, I'll introduce him shortly, and then you'll have time to ask Sean some questions about his work. And then I would like us to have a discussion. Now, Jeff at the back there is monitoring the online audience. So online people, please ask your questions and Jeff will field them. He'll come up here and he'll field them as your proxy. And what I'm hoping is that the session, the broadcasted session, will last about an hour or so, for an hour from now. And then afterwards, we have, those of us in the building, we have wine and a couple of hours actually. We have the space until 9, where we can drink all the wine and maybe start to have some discussions about the sorts of ideas that are being presented through this catalogue and this exhibition. So what I will do is now introduce Sean, and then we can start the evening proper. So Sean Carroll, sitting at the front here with his new wife, Nush, is a student at De Montfort University. He's associated with the Computer Arts Archive, which is the project we have in Leicester that is collecting computer arts work. And also, I think I see it as uncovering narratives that need to be recorded and discussed and presented. He's a PhD student coming towards the end of your PhD. Actually, submitting in 3 years. Incredible. 4 years. Oh, okay. Not. Somebody who
Incredible, strong word.
took 8 years. So I think that's pretty incredible. You're a arts practitioner, I would say. Do you describe yourself as an artist? Sometimes I've heard you call yourself an artist, but certainly a practitioner in the arts, curator, a making things happen sort of person, very involved in the Leicester computer arts scene and art scene generally. Your research is at De Montfort University, like I say, in collaboration with the Computer Arts Archive. And just very briefly to say, it's actually concerning the use of AI, artificial intelligence technology and tools in curation. And what I quite like about it in the context of this discussion here is that what I think Sean is showing is how you can use these technologies if you apply them critically to enhance what you're doing as a curator, as an artist or whatever, not to replace what you're doing. That's the thing for me. I've got my head around what AI can help us do better, not just what it can replace humans with. And now that I feel comfortable with that, I'm quite an evangelist for AI technology. I might change your mind in a month's time because I tend to do that, but at the moment I'm an evangelist. So there were a couple of people who turned up a bit late. Can I make sure you've got a catalogue? Yeah. And then I will hand over to Sean. Maybe you're going to talk for 20 minutes and then there'll be questions. 15, let's see what happens. 15. Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah, I'll hand over to you. Okay, great. You should be able to just run that. So, did you want one? Or you got one? Okay. Has anybody else got one? Everyone's got one. Yeah, okay.
Back.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you all for coming today. Little Scoundrels forms part of my PhD research, as Sean said, at De Montfort University, into the application of AI to explore archival materials in the curatorial process. I'm going to talk about this exhibition in particular, but start with a little bit of the philosophical approach and explanation as to why I think this way of working is important. As archives increasingly, like everything, look at artificial intelligence, the obvious starting point for them is to treat it as a tool for efficiency and automation. Sorting catalogues, managing metadata, and improving searchability. And this is really valuable work. You know, the archivist at De Montfort, for instance, currently has a 100-year backlog on digitization. My background, however, is in exhibition making, participatory work, and artist development. And my research looks more at critical discussion and the creative applications of generative AI beyond automation. For some time now, the ways in which we engage with technology, and crucially the ways technology engages with us, have been undergoing some fundamental shifts. And these shifts didn't start with AI. Decades before the rise of modern generative AI systems, philosophers such as Barthes critically explored how meaning, authority, and authenticity operate in the media landscapes that we inhabit. In this quote, Barthes argues that texts are inherently intertextual, composed from diverse cultural influences that continuously interact, challenge, and reshape one another. He emphasizes that meaning emerges through these dynamic interactions rather than from the isolated intentions of a single author. Just as Barthes' reader creates meaning independently of authorial content, modern AI systems generate responses by dynamically combining fragments of existing knowledge without necessarily relying on the original author's contexts. In both cases, meaning emerges from the interaction of multiple texts rather than from a single authoritative voice. So what does this mean for art, for archives, and the Computer Arts Archive? When Barthes claimed that the birth of the reader must be at the cost of the death of the author, he's arguing that focusing on the author's intended meaning limits interpretation. By declaring the death of the author, Barthes gives interpretive power, material, the descriptions, the documentation entirely to the reader, who now creates the meaning. I think this is the world we're moving into and have been for some time. But I don't think of this as a lament. I think it's an opportunity because this can be scalable, it can be personable, it can be spoke, and it can be patient to every single person who wants to interact with the archive. I think the job for archives and writers is to figure out how to be here and do it in an authentic and responsible and valuable and hopefully ecologically sustainable way. Otherwise, we'll have to take whatever OpenAI have to offer us. So let's talk a little bit about the exhibition and particularly how I put this together. I was asked by Sean to look at one of the catalogued collections on the website for a curatorial project with AI. Sean suggested looking at Page as it was a large body of work from a number of significant contributors and a collection that would be easy for me to digitize. Here's an overview of the workflow that I put together for this that we'll go through quickly. My initial idea for the narrative for this exhibition from reading Page in my early literature review was to look at early programming and to try and pull some descriptions of computational thinking from articles and rebuild those algorithms with AI as a way of exploring how these systems worked. I used to start with a program called Google Notebook, LM, which is an AI tool, which I used to generate 6 podcasts on the whole body of work, on the whole collection Page. These are podcasts that generate fully with computerized voices to listen to get a broad overview of the material. This allowed me to listen to them and take notes, essentially beginning my thematic analysis. When I did this, each one kept coming back to this visceral, brutal, challenging condemnation of power and entitlement, describing Mayakovsky's account of the fate of the Germanic Russians in the Volga region. Now, I guess this stood out to the AI as unusual in Page. It surprised me because I don't speak French very well, so I brushed over Mayakovsky's poem several times without any idea what it meant. This took me back to decision making. I realized if this was there, perhaps there was more stories in this radical, challenging vein that I hadn't really come across, and I felt like this might be a new angle. So this led me back into interrogating the AI some more, specifically looking for more radical elements, conversations, and now really looking for it to focus in on specifically challenges to the status quo. Once I gathered together a list that I was happy with to work as a body of work to start working with, I began more thematic analysis, breaking this down eventually into a body of quotes and then narrowing them down. Specifically now, I started working with ChatGPT, putting together larger sections of text that the Google Notebook had highlighted and seeing how this worked with me to hone a narrative that I was making. And I began piecing these back together into the calls for action. And at this point, it was interesting because I tried to treat AI as a tool. I try not to anthropomorphize it, but having gone through this point, I felt like I needed to give it a voice of some description. So I asked it to write the calls for action for me based on what I've narrowed down. I mean, the wording, I kind of knew what they would say. Finally, oh, sorry, that was that slide. Finally, this was like my mood board as I went through the making process. I gathered kind of as I went along. Whenever the AI sent me to a particular edition of Page, I'd look for these bits to cut out and save them to a folder. It's, I guess, cut and paste, concrete poetry-esque scene making style kind of turned into the style of the exhibition, or that's what I attempted as like a homage to the way the original editions were put together. I thought it was really important as well that it existed as a book. Prints, you'll see, are designed to be a book, the book that you've got first, and then the print second. And again, I felt this was really, it was important looking at the body of work I had. It was important to create something that reflected the way it was originally put together. Part of my overview. Hope you enjoy it. And if anyone has any questions, what do you want to do? Shall I take some questions and then you want to?
Yeah, maybe you can take some questions. I imagine people want to know a little bit about insights that you've gained by going through the material in this way.
Insight.
So it's a whole bunch of content. What have you learned from it by using an AI to help you explore it?
What have I learned about the content or curation or how?
The curator, but also the materials themselves.
Okay. I guess as a curator, what was really interesting for me here is the ability to more quickly find things that I found was interesting. You know, for instance, the poem Écoutez, Can I Listen, Scoundrels by Mayakovsky. It was put on the cover of page 10 by Gustave Metzger, fully in French, with no explanation of why it was there. And again, as I say, I didn't speak French, so this isn't something that was ever on my radar when I originally looked through the work. And to have a tool that can pick that up for me, it doesn't mean I have to accept it. It doesn't mean I have to go in the direction that the AI tells me to go, but a tool that provides me with a wider context, like much faster, in a way that I can work in a more iterative, quick, reflexive way, is incredibly valuable. And I think some people are very good at that and some people aren't. And I'm probably one of the people that needs to really focus my attention when I'm trying to do things like this. So for me, this was incredibly valuable. And I can see how that value, possibly not at this point, possibly it needs more thought and more development, these systems into the way that they're tailored to specific jobs, such as curating. People like probably me, you know, need to think more about how these tools could be better widely applied to curators. But I think the opportunity to have a body of knowledge and meet people where they are with it is incredibly valuable, because right now the emphasis of conveying the content of your archive, I'm just saying because, you know, just an example, right now that's really all on you as the archivist. You have to be there for everybody, you have to understand what everyone wants, and you have to do it all for next to no money, support, capacity. And for me, the opportunity, if we can get this right, is to reach a lot of people and allow a lot of people to see this vast body of knowledge that isn't always hidden or locked away as such, but in terms of people's ability to access it might as well be sometimes. You know, the opportunity to open the door is wider, I think, is the super exciting thing. In terms of what I've learned about the source material, you know, you can sort of tacitly think that like something, you know, the same problems, things don't change. It's always the same concerns about technology, but to really see it and to really see actually it's not necessarily the technology that people are scared of, it's the change and the unknown. And what does this mean for the skills that I've developed now? What does this mean for the identity I've created as an artist now? Possibly actually the problems. Not that there's a new technology, it's that it's an unknown. And this is terrifying and it's exciting at the same time. This is, as people who are invested in, I guess, art with technology and computers, this is the place where we have chosen already to situate ourselves. And to see people 50, 60 years ago equally terrified of the unknown, but equally brave enough to still be there, you know, exploring that. I think it's important to see and share. It's easy to think that just right now is the scary moment, but actually it's probably not. I mean, it is, but you know, it's not the only one.
Do we have any questions? Maybe we could start if you have any questions about what Sean has done in terms of his curatorial process, and then we can move on to talking about the content of the exhibition, maybe.
I've got a quick question, which is not exactly about the curatorial side, but you said when you were working with GPT, which I'm sure everybody has because it's so popular, you started to anthropomorphize, that's the right word, it, or as you worked with it. And how did you feel about working with the AI systems as you worked with them over the whole project? Did you find, you know, you felt better working with it after your initial feelings, or did it change as you worked through the project?
Not really. I mean, it's funny. I thought I should mention that I did kind of I did feel like I should ask it to write the wording for the calls to action because I felt like it should have a voice, which was quite odd at the time because I generally do try and think of these things as a tool. I try not to give it personalities or train it the way I'd like it to respond and stuff like that.
Did you find that you were drawn into thinking of it as a person because it was having a dialogue with you?
No, it was a surprise. Right at the end, it just popped into my head, really. I was trying to just write the wording and then I thought, oh, maybe I should give it a voice. And then I let it write it and then I was like, I'm not doing that again. I probably will. I didn't gradually get more comfortable with it. Yeah. I used most of them quite a lot in my research, and I think you realise the more you talk to these things, the more you realise that they will just say whatever you want and say, and it feels, I guess, when I first start looking to them writing, you know. You think it's really intelligent and then you realise it's mimicking in its responses, it's mimicking the way you talk, kind of. It's you know, it's saying what you want it to say. And it feels, for me anyway, the more I talk to them, the more kind of false I talk it in my thesis, it's about, you know, Baudrillard's simulacra, and I think that's what's going on with it. I think it's less of a real thing and more of a reflection back of an idea of a real thing. The more I talk about it, the more separated I feel.
So you didn't actually, you felt it was more of a tool that by the end you became aware of it as just a computer voice that you're dealing with?
I think it was a tool for me the whole way through. I just had a weird moment where I wanted to give it some, and then, yeah. People approach it differently, though. I mean, you know, people approach it generally in the way you find people gravitate towards approaching this in the way that's most useful for them. So, I mean, I think for some people it's helpful to develop a comfortable way of talking with it. I can see that as useful.
If you used it to write up the thing at the end, were you worried that it would hallucinate some new things into it? In the way that AI can just generate sentences, like you say, to make you happy?
I only used it to write literally the 5 headings.
So you knew what it was doing and you
Yeah.
didn't worry about that?
I think the majority of, especially for things like research, you know, the majority of the AI stuff that I did started in Google Notebook, and that's important for things like research because I'm not exactly sure, but there's definitely some different prompt engineering going on under the hood there, because the way it deals with references is it has to pull them back specifically to a piece of knowledge that you've given it, rather than create what it thinks is the reference, or try and generate the reference from its wider knowledge base, which the other ones do. And they've got better at that, I think.
Yeah.
The Google Notebook will tell you it doesn't know things if you've not told it them first, and then it gives you the place to where you've given it. So I wasn't worried about hallucination in this, because the first step of pulling together all of the knowledge, I mean, it's 20 pages, you know, like it was easy for me to just fact check it before I took it any further than that. In a different way of working or in a bigger project, I think it's the sort of thing that you'd have to be much more concerned about. But no, yeah, it wasn't an issue that I encountered in this.
Sure, thanks.
Yeah, I just wondered, the calls for action, did you very quickly come to this route with AI support, or did it throw up a couple of other themes that you may have pursued?
It threw up generally lots of things that were a bit radical. You know, there is lots of just little sentences from like the newsletter part of it, you know, where people are putting up meters at. There's a bit where I think lots of people met in London and naked somewhere, and pictures of that somewhere, you know. Quite quickly I felt it settled up. You know, it just threw me loads of stuff it thought was radical, right? And then when I went through that with kind of a thematic coding head on, they sort of naturally I could see quite quickly roughly what they were. It was going to be about the art market. It was going to be about commercialization. It was going to be about a lot of them actually came from this kind of longer conversation over 4 or 5 editions that was started by Frida Nack, about the use of the term computer art becoming a fashion, you know, and what that meant, and where that might lead. And there was a lot of very good-natured rejection of that from different artists, saying, you know, you're selling computer art short and you're missing the point. And I think then he was saying, well, I'm not intending to sell it short. I'm just saying it's still art. It's not a new thing, you know. And a lot of the material came from this wider conversation over several responses and editions. I think that was a big part of it. Were there any potential ones that not really. I think I could see quite. I think these are the sorts of things people were. It felt like these are the obvious concerns, and actually, as Sean sort of alluded to, I think they're still the obvious concerns, and you know, I think it was started to fall down in that way.
Slightly related, given that the AI took you off course, so to speak, with alternative suggestions. It reminds me of some research we were doing at Leicester back in the 80s, sorry, Loughborough back in the 80s, I think, a guy called Mike Smith. We were looking at AI, old-fashioned AI, and the cooperative machine, and the idea of how would you want a machine to cooperate? And he came up with this argument that you wouldn't want it to be a yes man, you'd want it to disagree, otherwise it's not really adding anything. So it's kind of interesting to see this, but it makes me intrigued to know whether it did actually come up with an answer to your initial inquiry. And, yeah.
I think I might still put that exhibition together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was a really good one was in one of the really early pages, and I used some of the quotes, but there was a program called Art One by Catherine Nash, which was like for drawing images with, you know, the keyboard characters and ASCII characters, and it made a really good tool that, and I think I wanted to be clear if I did make that, and if I did make that, I didn't want to be that I'm remaking artworks from the 70s. I guess what I wanted to do was an exploration of maybe the way people were thinking about putting the artwork together and similar results. So yes, it did start to do quite a good job with that. I've not done it yet
I
though.
wouldn't worry about imitating other people's art. It's the way you learn, isn't it? Really?
Well, no, and that's what I wanted to get. That's what I would have wanted it to be. I would have wanted it to be an exhibition where people could learn about the way that a particular challenge was approached by an artist. Yeah, I probably will still do that.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for the exhibition. It's really interesting. Made me think a lot. Can I ask about the position of the human in all this? Because I was struck by Sean's introduction. I'm sorry, I'm going to paraphrase. I get this wrong, but it was like you were nervous about AI, but then you kind of figured out, okay, it's just a kind of tool for the human, and we can kind of use it, and it's all right. And then in your talk, you started with the Roland Barthes and the death of the author, and that kind of famously says, you know, it kind of dehumanizes the human, and the text is just, the author is just a tissue of quotations, and there's kind of this flow of language. But then you kind of shifted it over to like, okay, so that's this flow, but then we've got the reader, and it kind of seemed to solidify for you a little bit about the reader, whereas another interpretation would be, well, the reader's just also caught in this flow and this kind of tissue of quotations. And kind of what's interesting about AI is it kind of creates a problem for that. You know, you kind of slowly went from rethinking what the human could be and its relation to technology to kind of then slowly going back to, we've got the human and we've got the technology, and they're kind of separate things, and we're just kind of using it. What's interesting about AI is it kind of potentially creates problems for that. It creates problems for that notion of, you know, we're separate from tools. I mean, you can say one argument is the human's only born out of tools. It's only because we learn to use tools that we become kind of what we understand by humans. If you think of language as a tool, then we're kind of by definition kind of born out of that. So you kind of made this journey, and I'm wondering, because right at the end you start talking about change being really terrifying, and we're nervous about that. Is that because you're a bit scared of kind of what the implications of that? So you're going to cling back on this?
I pendulum day to the other. I guess just to talk about that start at the start, for me, I definitely do, you know, and there's different interpretations, but the Barthes quote, for me, I think I felt that is empowering to the reader. I think it's positioning the reader as the point of interpretation, which arguably is the end result anyway. I mean, that's the way I've seen it. In the terms that the reader is the person who now pulls the knowledge together, you know. And I think there's a parallel with the way that specifically the more knowledge retrieval based, like the retrieval augmented generation systems that we have now work, whereby they take that kind of proxy of pulling together sources to create new meaning based on your query. So for me, I see that as a parallel. I appreciate you might have a slightly different take on it.
I think it's more interesting to think about here. I mean, because, you know, one of our problems as a species, as a society, is we treat the world, the outside world, as a tool, as an object. So that means we can use it as a resource, we can exploit the planet. And if we want to kind of get out of that, maybe we have to think of something different. And I'm just kind of wondering why there's the hesitation to kind of go down that. I mean, you kind of didn't move, you know, Michel Foucault famously critiques the death of the author and says, well, you know, so you problematize what the author is, but you just focus it around the work. You seem to have made a similar move, but you've kind of focused it around the reader. It's almost like, well, I can't give up on this. I have to kind of cling to that because that feels a bit more secure. But I'm wondering whether it been a scary thing if we moved around away from that. If we stopped seeing technology, the environment as this kind of other thing, and it was just part of us and we're part of that, maybe that wouldn't be such a scary thing. Maybe we'd stop ruining the planet. Maybe it would be a kind of a safer thing.
It could be.
I think you picked up on a really interesting topic there, which is I often hear people say about AI, oh, well, it's just a tool. You know, I just use it as a tool. It's almost dismissive to say it doesn't change me, I just use it. But the most powerful tools fundamentally change how we think as human.
Well, yeah.
So what you're saying there, so these tools didn't just enable us to do things, they changed how we think. And clearly AI is a tool that is going to make that happen. And the question for me is, do we embrace it and go with it and try and learn about it, or do we just allow other people to dictate what happens? And we all now become Elon Muskites or whatever, you know, thinking in a certain way because the tool tells us, whereas actually it changes our brain. We should be in control of this. We should be augmenting ourselves, making use of these things so that the tool is, you know, enables us to be better, not just to be quicker or this, that and the other. I think Graham had something to say there.
Well, the last 10 years I've been doing my family history and genealogy, and I've got pretty good on Ancestry at finding long distant relatives when my cousins have searched for them for years on end and not discovered them. And really, I wonder whether the AI in Ancestry has taught me to ask the right question, or whether the AI in Ancestry knows the sort of answers that Graham is looking for.
So that's feedback, isn't it?
Yes.
The feedback works in two directions.
Yes.
That's great. And that's interesting. Any more questions? I know we're talking a bit more about process now, but curatorial process, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think this thing about tool is interesting. I think it's maybe more interesting than that, because that's, you know, we just go around in circles with tools, a bit limited. I recently wrote a piece about someone who's working with slime mold, and you take slime mold and it's got this wet intelligence, they call it. It's really fascinating. And she was just saying to me, you know, when you take it from its habitat and you bring it into the lab, it adjusts its behavior, you know, so you have to take care of it. And it suddenly struck me that that was actually maybe a better way of talking about AI as an extension of the self or displacement of the human. That if you think about, we've got to take care of this single cell organism, then we have to take care of AI and how it will evolve and grow and develop. So I think I probably prefer that to the, well, obviously we take care of tools, but do we take care of Flint? You know, so maybe thinking of it as an organism might be a helpful way.
My prized possession is a Stone Age arrowhead. I was given as a... Any more questions? And I'm specifically going to maybe suggest we think about these call to actions and have a little discussion about them. Any more about the process? So, yeah, Jeff?
There are some questions that have come in by the chat from the people outside or wherever they are. I just read, there's quite a few actually. I use the ones that are most relevant. There's one a bit technical, Sean, unfortunately, maybe.
Okay.
Which is, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the statistical tendency for AI to average in relation to the archive, as opposed to, say, an emphasis on outliers. So i.e., is it kind of approximating what's in there and losing some of the interesting detail because it's a statistical?
I think it probably is. I kind of touched on the podcast bit at the start. Now, this was quite good for me because I guess learn better from listening than reading sometimes. And the reason why I generated, so, you know, I put all of the additions in and I say, make me a podcast and let's talk about it. And it will be 20 minutes of just talking about page. But then because this is a generative process, when I delete it and regenerate it, it's a new podcast. You know, so that was the reason why I made 6. Because what was interesting for me is which bits came up over and over again. But also because, again, this is a generative process, there was some bits that came up once. And I did that specifically because I think you're right. There is probably a tendency with AI specifically when the query isn't razor focused, you know, there will be a tendency for it to average. And that is one of the things.
They're talking about, yeah. That's what this person's asking about. Is that?
Yeah, I think that's something that we you know, I don't know the trajectory of the way how these tools will change. I mean, I don't know if that will change. I kind of think that the way that these algorithms work, it might not. And it might be down to us to come up with smarter ways to use them to make sure we can get to the stuff we want and avoid that. So yeah, I think it absolutely does, and I think we need to be aware of that. I tried to be aware of that. I think that's an ongoing.
The data set gets bigger, it's harder to know what's missing, isn't it?
As it gets bigger, it's harder to know what's missing, and specifically with the new ones, as it starts to get trained on dummy data, and the average becomes an average of things that aren't even necessarily all real, which is in itself as a really odd place for us to end up in. Yeah, I don't know specifically, but I would imagine based on using it that it does average quite a lot.
Yeah, sure. Okay, next question is about scoundrelness, which I'm not really sure is a word, but anyway.
Let's have it.
It's from, I think it's Brian Reffin Smith, this one, who we know.
Well, he's a scoundrel.
This is another Brian Smith, probably Brian. Oh, it is in fact, I can see his picture. So Brian says, I wanted to ask what participants think about the differences in terms of scoundrelness, curatorial approaches, and computer-based artworks in general between different regions. So it's about the amount of scoundrelness in computer work in different regions, such as Yugoslavia, France, Japan, USA, etc. So is there a regional change?
I don't know that I can.
Yeah, it's a funny
that
question, isn't it? It's a good question.
I'd be keen to know if he's still on the chat what he thinks.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, he's here or there, so.
Or if anyone in the room has a sense of
it's quite difficult to even say the question.
if anyone in the room has a sense of scoundrelness geographically. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Brian. Oh no, we do.
One of the points I was going to make at some point in the discussion is it's very what constitutes being a scoundrel is very much dependent on the context. So the fact that in different environments you might get different types of scoundrel. You know, if you're in one sort of society, to be a scoundrel is to be one sort of person. I don't want to allude to current events in the academia in the US, but apparently there are suddenly a lot of scoundrels in universities in the USA who are losing all their funding because they're scoundrels. Yeah, and also in other, say, Eastern, different kinds of well, are they different political? Let's not go down that route. But anyway, it is contextual. So I think he's probably right that there are different types of degrees of scoundrelness, perhaps, or types of scoundrel in different contexts. And even in terms of curating, what you curate and exhibit could get you into issues as well. I think the danger of it is part of being creative. You can't be creative without risking even mental illness. It's dangerous to be creative because you're going against givens. So I think, again, it depends just how comfortable people feel or how desperate, whether they're going to be scoundrels. That's a long answer, but
I'll take Steve.
It's a good question.
There is another question that relates to a bit, which is, does AI and the history of computer art does AI and the history of computer art lead to a future where all cultural products are dynamic and generated to suit the immediate desires of the audience? And that would be an individual that's perceiving or consuming the art, you know, rather than be a creator and have have all the stress of that, no money generally. Why not just have generated art, generated experience, generated novels, for instance?
Hope not.
Yeah. But it happens in gaming already. Gaming will follow the route you go to a certain extent and create a world for you in 3D as you play it. Yeah. So it's related to gaming, turning art into gamifying art.
I think, I don't know, I mean, you don't know, there might be a place where we get to a point where art, if you like, is built as a response algorithmically to a person's input. Feels like an odd place for art to end up.
Sure.
But also, if it did, surely, I don't know, I feel like possibly there's still an element of designing how that works.
Yeah,
Which might then become the role of an artist. I mean, in terms of building of things like generative systems for artwork, we've for quite a long time been in a place where we don't just imagine and create a finished product. We imagine a bracket that variables can move around and exist in, and how we frame that bracket is how we present our work. I would not want to get too far away from the idea that people make things for other people. I feel like there's something quite human in that.
Yeah, I mean, there's something called Botto. I don't know whether anybody's heard of it, an AI artist, which is a big show recently in London. And it's an AI that produces lots of artworks, and then it's voted on within a system. And then the most popular piece will put out every week. And Botto is a sort of character, but it's invented by an artist, and an artist runs the whole show. So it is run by a person, even though it's a supposed AI personality is creating the art. So you're saying, even though it's computer generated, it's still controlled by a human, kind of devised by a human, thought up by a human. But I think maybe in fiction, if you have very strict genre fiction like crime or romance, where things are fairly strict, the genre rules are quite strict. You could generate text, a novel in the genre area, or maybe even in family saga, which is a more literary format. So you can see where, because it's a text-based thing, I mean, we're maybe more visual artists, but in the text area, it can certainly whack out those novels.
Can I just say though, what about doesn't it just open up the possibility of lots of people being artists more than there are?
Yeah, it's liberating.
Rather than waiting on the artist to work with it and create the work, I create it for myself, which is not a million miles away from doing, using the genealogy app and what have you. But I guess it's about people having the confidence to use it, to be confident to be critical of it, which, this whole business of critical engagement it's all very well us talking about how we relate to it, but there's a lot of people that are just scared of it and don't feel that they've got the ability to.
Well, I think with it, people just, things like Midjourney and Night Cafe, they're text to art generators. People use it for entertainment, as pastime. And they have a lot of fun with it. I don't think people are scared of it at all. They might be scared of the longer term impact of it on their job or something. But when it comes to just playing with these things, people love it. It's so popular.
I think it's hard to generalize about people.
Yeah, true.
Because there will be some who are frightened and some who aren't. So I don't think you can generalize like that. And pointing out some people are. Also, the enabling thing is great. I mean, the more people who can do it, the more people become critical of it when they discover what they've made isn't as satisfying as they thought it was, which is anyone being creative becomes, critical. What's wrong? The more the merrier, in my opinion. And if it's an enabling device, I've seen, just using a computer enabling device. When I was artist in residence back in the 80s, I was invited along to a Cheshire home where there was a woman who could only interact with the computer with a probe on the top of her head, and she could write poetry, she could communicate and do things. If anything enables people, it's got to be good, surely.
And can I bring us back to the slide? And I'm wondering, okay, so we've democratized kind of art and lots of people can do it. I wonder if the slime can be an artist as well. Even rather than us just taking care of the slime, maybe the slime takes care of us. And that sounds weird. But if you go to the Courtauld and you see the soil exhibition, what that's kind of saying is, look, you know, the soil's looking after us. It's not that we're just taking care of this soil. We're kind of part of that. So are we going to kind of go and say, okay, the slime can be an artist? And if we don't, if we're not willing to go there, are we then the scoundrels? Because we're kind of indifferent.
I think there's potentially democratizing the tools is important to build critical understanding and critical dialogue. I don't think simply democratizing the tools equals the creation of art necessarily. I think there needs to be a more of a critical, and part of this, you know, that's kind of part of this, making sure the human is still involved, you know, like we can all write something in Dali and make an image, and like you say, it's fun, it's a game, you know, unless you're creating some kind of abstract narrative within the work that you do, representative of yourself in some way, in a way that you want to share with the world and be vulnerable and put it out there. I think it probably, for me, probably it's not a piece of art, it's maybe just a. So can the slime be art? I don't know if it can for me.
Have sorry, I've just been viewing an exhibition where the slime mold is making the most beautiful plans and shifts, which the artist who's working with it, she did time-lapse camera with it. So basically, she's working together with it, co-creating and showing its emergence. So it's already art in that sense. Depending, if you see art as being, then it's a living creature. I don't think it's a question.
I think maybe there's something about the artist's intention though, is there?
Sure.
But is that actually true, or is that you acting like a tissue of quotation from Bart or a large language model? Is it that kind of idea just flowing through you and you're
I think we all
criticizing it, you're a scoundrel?
we all get to make that decision. For me, it's true. Because I think you have to make a decision on what is art and what isn't, you know. I do think.
Well, I think surely, I mean, the whole great thing about art is it is personal. It isn't like science, which has to be agreed by everybody. And science, if an individual is
People don't have to agree.
the individual is moved by a piece, you cannot deny that to them. And that's the power of art. That's the power of it, is you don't have to have anybody else agree.
Do you know the quotation from Leonardo da Vinci about the stain on the wall?
No, I don't. No.
Looking up.
Okay.
That actually tells us a lot about context, you know, placing where the lines are. Because if the stain on the wall is the most important thing to Da Vinci, then, you know, anything, the found object, it's maybe how you frame it or you contextualize it. And that's, you know, that's what you've done here. You've brought things out from somewhere else and drawn it to attention. And that, you know, that's something that's individual and, you know, worth kind of paying attention to. I think that this is what the intervention is in a way.
Okay.
Sean, there's a quick thing. Can you stop sharing the screen so that people outside can see the room?
Oh, okay.
I didn't realise that.
Possibly. Can you see what people are seeing?
Oh, yeah, that's better. It's got the root. Yeah, that should be okay. If you release it from the screen. Yeah.
I think so.
Okay, well, I think this is a very interesting discussion, and it's the sort of thing I would love people involved in CAS to continue. Because where do we continue it? Continue it here, today, but also ongoing events. Maybe we can call more events. We do have a Facebook page where if they use Facebook, and there's good old fashioned email as well if you've got something to say. And Sean is in here as the curator with his email address. website. And I'm in there as well if you want to send something to the Computer Arts Society, but I encourage you to maybe talk to Sean, and I know you've got other things to do, but it'd be interesting to get people's feedback. So just a few observations from me, having watched this work develop over time. What has interested me is how the use of tools has changed over time, and partly that's driven by the fact that tools have changed so rapidly. Things like Google LM, I don't think, in the project. You've now got a fundamental, brand new tool, let's call it a tool for now, enables you to explore content in a new way that didn't exist when you started the process of exploring it. And this is happening all the time. There are things emerging in this world of AI, and it's broadly called AI, that week by week almost things are coming along. And what I've decided to do is I'm trying to engage with it as much as possible. I listen to podcasts, I use tools, I try to understand how they work and so on. Not everyone is going to want to do that, but I do think it's good if those of us who are interested in it can bring it to the table, and maybe Kaz has a role in helping to share this knowledge and this information. So on the AI, the use of AI in this project, I think it's been very interesting to watch how it's developed, and it will continue to develop. You may want to revisit this, and you'll use other tools for future projects and so on. But then there are also the things that you pulled out of early page, and we all have our notes here. We have the calls to action, and I just wanted to read them out. I'm not going to say we've got time now to discuss them all. I'd love to get just a little bit of feedback from people, what they think about these themes. Reject institutional apathy. Weaponize art against technology. Reclaim the artist's power over technology. Or did I say technocracy? Sorry, that's my idea. Reclaim artist's power over technology. Break free from the art market system. Create art that intervenes in the world. So that they've been pulled out with your involvement by the AI as important themes that emerged from early Art Society dialogues. And I would just like maybe a little mini discussion, because I don't want to go on all night. But do these feel relevant to now? Or is this like from the past? Is this like back in the 60s and 70s, it mattered, these things don't matter anymore? And I just wonder if anybody had any opinions on these 5 themes. It's a lot to ask. And I'm just sort of...
I think there's a lot of current, I mean, I love the last one anyway, create art that intervenes in the world, but the reject institutional apathy, it feels really prescient.
Anyone to broadly, they feel relevant, very relevant to me. And what I'm wondering, are they relevant because they're always relevant? For these, any point in the last 60, probably 100 years, all of these things would have felt relevant because the word it is. Or are they relevant because we're now in a particular time where these things have become relevant again? I was wondering, are there any thoughts on that? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think given there's a bit of good stuff behind this, and he's certainly become very relevant. His name keeps coming up all over the place. So I think on that level, renewed relevance. I don't think that these calls were particularly relevant to everyone who set up the Computer Arts Society. The Arts Society was seen by some as part of the technocratic apparatus. So I'm sure if you just pull these out and you're building on Mayakovsky, who's this poet of the revolution, then fine, if you decide to take this forward. But I think there's a more complex discussion about the Computer Arts Society as a organism than just 5 varying calls that AI has. Because Gustav expressed himself so strongly, I can see why AI maybe grabbed onto what he was saying. Sorry, that's my point.
Yeah, again, my thoughts really are that I do feel we're in an unusual time because of the rapid pace of development of technology, but I sort of feel these are the sorts of things that artists do. Artists always complain about the art market, or some of them, the ones who aren't getting the money from it, whatever. And new technology in art always has a double-edged sword, because the technology typically comes from the term they often use, military industrial complex. So the AIs they're using have a connection to that, and now they're being used in military. VR in particular came from the military and is now going back to the military. You know, anybody who's working in VR, they are developing, if they innovate in VR, they will be helping augmented soldiers fight on the battlefield. Let's not pretend. Again, you can disagree that VR is anything other than that ultimately. And various other technologies that are being used. So I feel that we're in a time of rapid technological change, so these maybe feel more relevant, but they're probably the sorts of things that artists maybe on that fringe, on that radical fringe, are always engaging with. And that's just my view. I'm happy to be proven wrong on that. What I am interested in knowing is that could we start having a dialogue within the Computer Arts Society that maybe asks some of these questions. And so are these relevant to now? Should the Computer Arts Society be an organisation that is actually drawing attention to these contradictions in how digital artists, computer artists work? Is that a fresh role not a fresh role? Is it revisiting an early role, bringing it out into the contemporary digital art scene? So again, that's part of a dialogue I would like to have with the Art Society. Also, I think it's important to say that those 5 calls to action are sort of explored in more detail in here. So when you get a chance to look at the exhibition or go through the catalogue, you might feel more informed about contributing to a discussion. So it'd be great if people could do that. And also maybe talk a little bit about a process that we have underway. When I say I want CAS to have a dialogue, it's sort of difficult because dialogue's best when people meet online or in person. We do have a few channels. Email I've mentioned, you can email thoughts in. We have the Facebook group, and of course, not everyone wants to be on Mark Zuckerberg's platform. It's again one of these contradictions, but maybe the Facebook group is useful. We have Instagram, Mark Zuckerberg again. Maybe we need to have other channels for communication. I don't know how else people would want to communicate. Maybe we need to have more events like this. So there are a few nods maybe with that we could have a few more sort of events where people come along or organise sort of impromptu Zooms and whatever. So I'd like to see a bit of a conversation happening over the next few months, and we want to reconvene. We definitely have a date to reconvene to talk about this on the first night of the EVA conference. So EVA happens every year here. Makes it happen at the moment. Wants to move on, but or as ever stand down. But at the moment, he's the person who's making it happen. And on the Monday night, we're going to have a revisit of the exhibition. In fact, we're leaving this exhibition up for an extended period of time so that as many people as possible can see it. And I think it'd be great if those of you who've reflected on this come back then and we talk about it more. Talk about, is this something that CAS can grab hold of again? And so that happens on the 7th of July. Is that right? Is that the
evening is free.
And it's free, more wine. We'll be in a minute. So I'd like to open that up. So we've got a few months to talk about it. Choose your preferred channel. If nothing else, email myself, Sean. Everyone in Leicester's called Sean. I don't know if you realise. And let us know. We'll try to establish conversations with you, whatever channels people want to use. And unless there are more questions, I think maybe those of us here have some wine and we can just have a conversation if you've got time to be around. People online, I hope we can convene more discussions through CAS, maybe informal ones. I don't have an online, I have an offline element, just chats online. If you've got thoughts, send them in to us, read the catalogue, and I hope this might be part of a process of really getting those of us involved in the Computer Arts Society thinking about these ideas and maybe engaging with people afresh and getting some radicalness back into CAS. Do we finish there? Yeah.